Well, let me tell you about the day my world turned upside down, then right side up in the most unexpected way possible. My name is Judith Perkins, I'm 34 years old and I run a $500 million oil extraction company. But none of that mattered when I answered that phone call 3 weeks ago. Hello lovelies. Subscribe to stay connected, comment a quick hi, and let us know your location. We love hearing from you. Now let's continue today's story. Judith, honey, you need to sit down for this, my assistant Gemma said, her voice trembling through the receiver. I was in the middle of reviewing geological surveys when she patched through a call that would dredge up 20 years of buried pain. Miss Perkins? This is Austin Hudson calling. The name hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Austin Hudson, the man who'd torn my family apart when I was 14. The man who'd looked my pregnant mother dead in the eye and said, Diane, you need to get rid of that thing before it ruins both our lives. That thing was me. My hands started shaking as memories flooded back. Mom crying in our tiny apartment, choosing between keeping me or keeping him. The way he'd slam doors whenever I walked into a room. How he'd whisper poison into her ear about how I was holding her back, dragging her down, making her life miserable. I know this might come as a shock, Austin continued, his voice smooth as silk, completely oblivious to the earthquake he'd just triggered. But I have a business proposition that could benefit us both tremendously. The audacity was breathtaking. I pressed mute and took 3 deep breaths, fighting the urge to hang up immediately. But something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe the need for closure, kept me on the line. What kind of business proposition? I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady. Well, I've been following your success in the industry. Impressive work, really. I represent a consortium of investors who are very interested in partnering with Perkins Energy Solutions. We're talking about a potential acquisition that could net you, well, let's just say it would set you up for life. Set me up for life. The irony was suffocating. This was the same man who'd convinced my mother that keeping me would ruin her chances at happiness. Who'd made her choose between her unborn daughter and her relationship. Who'd walked away the moment she chose me, leaving us with nothing but his parting words. Don't come crawling back when that mistake destroys everything good in your life. My mother never dated again after that. She poured everything into raising me, working 3 jobs to keep us afloat. She died 5 years ago from a heart attack brought on by decades of stress and overwork, never knowing that her mistake would one day build an empire. I'd like to meet in person, Austin continued. I'm actually in town for the next few days. Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner? I know a wonderful place downtown. You want to take me to dinner? I repeated slowly. Of course. I always believed you had potential, Judith. Your mother raised a remarkable woman. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly I almost admired the craftsmanship. I hung up without giving him an answer, but my mind was already racing. For 20 years, I'd imagined what I'd say to Austin Hudson if I ever saw him again. Now fate was handing me the opportunity on a silver platter. I called my lawyer, Patricia Hayes, immediately. Patty, I need you to do a deep background check on someone. Austin Hudson. I want to know everything. His financial situation, his business dealings, his personal life. Everything. This sounds personal, she said carefully. We'd been friends since law school and she could read my tone like a book. It is. Very personal. While waiting for her report, I did my own digging. Social media revealed a man living beyond his means. Expensive cars, luxury vacations, designer clothes. But the deeper I dug, the more interesting it got. His consortium of investors was actually a shell company. He was drowning in debt and desperate for a quick score. He wasn't trying to buy my company. He was trying to con me. The man who'd called me a mistake, who'd destroyed my mother's happiness, who'd left us with nothing. This pathetic creature thought he could waltz back into my life and take everything I'd built. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. Austin, it's Judith. I'd love to have that dinner. How about tomorrow night at 8? I'll text you the address. Wonderful. I knew you'd see the potential in this partnership. Partnership. Right. I hung up and smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. Tomorrow night, Austin Hudson was going to learn exactly what kind of woman his mistake had become. I chose Romano's, an upscale restaurant where I knew the owner personally. Giuseppe had been one of my first clients when I started Perkins Energy and he owed me several favors. More importantly, he had excellent security cameras and discreet staff who knew how to handle delicate situations. I arrived 30 minutes early, positioning myself at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. When Austin walked in, I barely recognized him. The confident man I remembered from my teenage years had been replaced by someone softer around the edges, with silver hair and expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide his desperation. He spotted me and smiled, that same charming smile that had once swept my mother off her feet. "Judith, my goodness, you look absolutely stunning. Success suits you." I stood and accepted his awkward hug, noting the cologne that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Hello, Austin. Look, well, it wasn't entirely true. Up close, I could see the telltale signs of a man under pressure. The slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes darted around the room, the forced nature of his smile. I have to say, I'm incredibly proud of what you've accomplished," he continued as we sat down. "When I heard about Perkins Energy Solutions, I thought, that has to be Diane's daughter. Your mother would be so proud." The mention of my mother sent a cold fury through my veins, but I kept my expression neutral. "She passed away 5 years ago." His face fell, but I caught something else in his expression. Relief? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to analyze. "I'm so sorry for your loss. She was a wonderful woman." Yes, she was. "She never remarried, you know." Austin recovered quickly, launching into his rehearsed presentation. He painted a picture of mutual prosperity, using terms like synergistic opportunities and market consolidation. It was impressive. Actually, he'd done his homework on my company's operations, though his information was clearly outdated. "The consortium I represent has deep pockets and extensive experience in the energy sector," he explained, pulling out a leather portfolio. "We're prepared to offer you $400 million for a complete acquisition of Perkins Energy Solutions." $400 million. It was a substantial sum, but less than half what my company was actually worth. More tellingly, it was exactly the amount I'd publicly mentioned in a Forbes interview 2 years ago as my company's valuation at the time. "That's quite generous," I said, taking a sip of my wine. "Tell me about these investors. I'd like to know who I'd be working with." For just a moment, his confidence wavered. "Well, they prefer to maintain their privacy for now. You understand how these things work. Due diligence, NDAs, that sort of thing." "Of course. But surely you can tell me something about their background?" "Their other investments." "International portfolio," he said vaguely. "Very diversified holdings. The important thing is that they recognize the value in what you've built and want to help you take it to the next level." I nodded thoughtfully, letting the silence stretch until he felt compelled to fill it. "I have to ask, Judith, do you remember me at all? From when you were younger?" There was the opening I'd been waiting for. "Oh yes," I said softly. "I remember you very clearly. You probably don't recall much. You were just a kid then. But I always knew you were special. Bright, determined. I used to tell your mother you were going to do great things." The rewriting of history was breathtaking in its audacity. I leaned forward, my voice taking on a conversational tone. "Actually, Austin, I remember quite a bit. I remember you telling my mother that keeping me would ruin her life. I remember you calling me her biggest mistake. I remember the night you walked out because she wouldn't— what was the phrase you used? Get rid of that thing?" The color drained from his face so rapidly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. That's not— you must be misremembering." "Am I? Because I also remember you telling her she'd never amount to anything with a bastard child dragging her down. I remember you saying no decent man would ever want a woman saddled with someone else's mistake." "Judith, please, you have to understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I reached into my purse and pulled out a small digital recorder, pressing play. My 14-year-old voice filled the space between us, thin and scared. "Mom, why is Austin so angry? Did I do something wrong?" Then my mother's voice, exhausted and defeated. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Austin he thinks it would be better if it was just him and me." "But where would I go?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I honestly don't know." Austin stared at the device as his own voice emerged from the speakers, cold and final. "Diane, make your choice. The kid or me. But understand this. If you choose her, don't expect me to stick around and watch you throw your life away." The recording continued, capturing the sound of a door slamming, my mother crying, and my young voice trying to comfort her. Austin sat frozen, his face a mask of horror and recognition. I recorded that conversation on an old cassette player I kept under my bed, I explained calmly. Transferred it to digital years ago. Amazing what technology can preserve, isn't it? Judith, I was young and stupid. People change. Do they? I interrupted. Because from where I'm sitting, you seem to be exactly the same manipulative opportunist you always were. Only now, instead of trying to convince my mother to abandon her daughter, you're trying to convince that daughter to hand over her life's work. I signaled the waiter for another bottle of wine, enjoying Austin's visible discomfort. Let me tell you what really happened after you left us. My mother worked 16-hour days to keep food on the table. She cleaned office buildings at night and waited tables during the day. She never complained, never blamed me for her situation, even though I could see in her eyes that she wondered sometimes if you were right. Austin tried to speak, but I held up a hand. She died of a heart attack at 58, exhausted from decades of struggle that never would have happened if you'd been half the man she deserved. But you want to know the beautiful irony in all this. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. Your abandonment made me stronger. Every night I went to bed hungry, every time we couldn't pay the electric bill, every scholarship application I filled out to get through college. All of it was fuel for the fire you lit when you called me a mistake. I had you investigated, Austin. Did you know that? My attorney dug up everything about your little consortium. I pulled out a thick manila folder and placed it on the table between us. Blackstone Holdings International doesn't exist. The business address you provided is a P.O. box in a strip mall. The references you gave are all fake phone numbers that redirect to your personal cell. His eyes darted to the folder like it contained a bomb. But here's what's really interesting. You've been running this same scam for 3 years now. 8 different companies, all targeted by mysterious international investors represented by Austin Hudson. And you know what they all had in common? I opened the folder and spread out several photographs and documents. They were all run by people who'd crossed you in the past. Business partners who'd squeezed you out, former employees who'd reported your unethical practices, even an ex-wife who'd taken you to court for alimony. The photos showed Austin entering office buildings, shaking hands with smiling executives who had no idea they were being set up for elaborate revenge schemes disguised as business deals. Jennifer Morrison from Morrison Logistics. She fired you for embezzlement 10 years ago. You convinced her to sign over controlling interest in her company to your fake investors, then disappeared with her down payment of $200,000. Austin's hands were visibly shaking now. David Combs from Combs Industries. He caught you stealing client lists and had you blacklisted from 3 major corporations. You sold him on a partnership deal and walked away with his proprietary technology and half his customer base. You don't understand, Austin whispered. I needed the money. I had debts. Everyone has debts, Austin. Not everyone becomes a predator. So tell me, I continued, my voice gaining strength, what was the plan with me? Were you going to wait until I signed the initial papers before disappearing? Or were you planning something more elaborate? Maybe actually going through with the fake sale before stealing everything and leaving me with worthless contracts. Austin slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him. It wasn't personal, Judith. I didn't even know it was you when I started researching Perkins Energy. When I realized who you were, I almost called the whole thing off. But you didn't. I couldn't. The people I owe money to, they're not the patient type. I needed a big score and your company was perfect. I thought maybe if I could pull this off, I could pay everyone back and start fresh somewhere new. Start fresh, I repeated slowly. Just like you did 20 years ago when you walked out on my mother. The truth hung between us like a toxic cloud. This man had built his entire adult life around running away from consequences, always looking for the next easy mark, the next person to blame for his failures. I know what you're thinking, he said desperately. But I'm not that person anymore. I've changed. I've learned from my mistakes. Have you? Because it seems to me like you've spent the last 20 years making the same mistake over and over again. The only difference is the scale. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You want to know what the real mistake was, Austin? It wasn't my mother getting pregnant. It wasn't her keeping me. The mistake was thinking that a coward like you deserved to be part of our family. His face crumpled and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice taking on the authoritative tone I used in boardroom negotiations. You're going to return every penny you stole from those other companies. All of it. Austin's head snapped up. I can't do that. I don't have. Oh, but you do. I pulled out another document from my folder. You see, while you were busy researching me, I was busy researching you. That house in the hills. The one you bought under your ex-wife's name to hide it from creditors? Worth about $3.2 million. His face went white. The art collection you've been building? The vintage car collection? The offshore accounts you think nobody knows about? I know about all of it, Austin. Every hidden asset, every shell company, every dirty trick you've used to stay one step ahead of the people you've robbed. I slid a business card across the table. This is my head of security, former FBI. He's very good at finding things people don't want found. He's also very good at sharing information with the right authorities when crimes have been committed. You can't do this, Austin stammered. I'll go to prison. Probably. But here's the thing. I'm feeling generous tonight. Maybe it's the wine, maybe it's the satisfaction of watching you squirm, but I'm going to give you a choice. I signaled for the check, never taking my eyes off his face. Option 1. You make full restitution to every person you've defrauded, turn yourself in to the authorities, and accept whatever consequences come your way. In exchange, I'll provide character testimony about your cooperation and make sure you get credit for trying to make things right. And option 2? I turn everything over to the FBI tomorrow morning and let them handle it however they see fit. No testimony, no cooperation, no consideration for any attempts at redemption. The waiter brought our check and I handed him my credit card without looking at it. You have 24 hours to decide. Austin reached across the table, his hand trembling as he tried to grab mine. Judith, please. I know I hurt you and your mother. I know I was selfish and wrong. But destroying me won't bring her back. I pulled my hand away, disgusted by his touch. You think this is about revenge? You think I spent 20 years building a company just so I could destroy one pathetic con man? I stood up, towering over him as he remained slumped in his chair. This isn't about bringing my mother back. This is about making sure you never hurt another family the way you hurt ours. This is about consequences, Austin. Something you've been running from your entire adult life. I'll pay everyone back, he said desperately. I'll find a way. Just give me more time. Time. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You had 20 years of time. 20 years to become a better person, to build something meaningful, to contribute something positive to the world. Instead, you chose to become a predator. I gathered my things, leaving him sitting alone at the table. My mother used to say that everything happens for a reason. I never believed her, until tonight. You walking out on us wasn't a tragedy, Austin. It was a gift. Because if you'd stayed, I might have grown up thinking that men like you were acceptable. I might have settled for less than I deserved. I paused at his chair, leaning down so only he could hear me. Instead, I learned that the only person I could count on was myself. I learned that success isn't handed to you by men in expensive suits making empty promises. It's built, brick by brick, through honest work and determination. Judith, wait. But I was already walking away, my heels clicking against the marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like victory. I didn't have to wait long for Austin's decision. At 6 a.m. the next morning, my phone rang. It was Patricia. He turned himself in, she said without preamble. Walked into the FBI field office 3 hours ago with a lawyer and a confession. He's cooperating fully, giving up names, locations, account numbers, everything. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and something else. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of closure. What about the victims? Full restitution is being arranged. He's liquidating everything. The house, the cars, the art, even his watch collection. It won't cover everything, but it's a start. The FBI is also working with international authorities to recover funds from the offshore accounts. Over the next few weeks, I followed the case through Patricia and the media coverage. Austin Hudson's arrest had made headlines, not because of the amount he'd stolen, but because of the methodical way he'd targeted people from his past. The story captivated the public imagination, a tale of karma served with surgical precision. The 8 companies he'd defrauded would eventually recover most of their losses. Jennifer Morrison sent me a handwritten thank you note, explaining that my investigation had provided the evidence needed to finally bring Austin to justice. David Combs called personally to express his gratitude, joking that he'd been waiting 10 years for this moment. But the call that meant the most came from an unexpected source. Miss Perkins? This is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Financial Crimes Unit. I wanted to personally thank you for your cooperation in the Hudson case. I'm just glad I could help. You did more than help. Your investigation was more thorough than anything our forensic accountants could have produced. Where did you learn to dig this deep? I smiled, thinking of all those nights I'd spent as a teenager, teaching myself computer programming and research techniques while my mother worked her second job. Necessity, detective. Necessity. 6 months later, I stood in the cemetery where my mother was buried, holding a copy of Forbes magazine with my face on the cover. America's Most Inspiring CO, the headline read. From Poverty to Power, the Judith Perkins story. Hey Mom, I said softly, kneeling beside her headstone. I thought you'd want to see this. I placed the magazine against the marble, securing it with a small stone. Austin went to prison. 5 years, though he'll probably serve 3 with good behavior. He's been making restitution payments from whatever job he can get with a felony record. The irony isn't lost on me, he's finally learning what it's like to work honest jobs to survive. A gentle breeze rustled the pages of the magazine, and I took it as a sign that she was listening. I've been thinking about what you used to say, that everything happens for a reason. I think I finally understand what you meant. If Austin had stayed, if he'd been a decent man, I never would have developed the drive to prove him wrong. I never would have learned to be self-reliant. I never would have built Perkins Energy. I stood up, brushing dirt off my knees. The company's doing better than ever. We just signed a contract to provide clean energy solutions to 3 major cities. We're creating jobs, helping the environment, making a real difference in the world. But the best part wasn't the success or the recognition. It was the phone call I'd received that morning from my head of HR. Ms. Perkins, I wanted to let you know, we've received over 200 applications for our new scholarship program for single mothers pursuing business degrees. The Diane Perkins Memorial Scholarship would provide full tuition, housing, and childcare assistance for 10 women each year. It was funded entirely by Perkins Energy's profits, ensuring that no mother would have to choose between her dreams and her children. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I saw the Forbes article. I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. Your mother would be too. I'm sorry for everything. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some apologies, no matter how sincere, can't undo 20 years of consequences. But as I drove away from the cemetery, I realized that I wasn't angry anymore. Austin Hudson had given me something far more valuable than he'd ever taken away. He'd given me the motivation to become unstoppable. And for that, I was almost grateful. The whole thing still feels surreal. Part of me can't believe it got this far, but here we are. Honestly, do you think they left me any other choice?